Hey there, in this video I want to go into meditating 2 hours every day for an entire year. My most popular video on my channel is the one where I'm going into my experiences meditating 1 hour every day for a whole year, what I learned, that kind of stuff. And I'm really happy that that's my most popular video because I feel like it paints a vision for what is possible with pursuing this practice seriously. And so in a lot of ways, I consider this video right here to be a sequel to that past video because of the fact that a year ago, just about a little over a year ago, I started meditating 2 hours a day instead of 1. And even though doing an hour a day is already really intense, I would say relative to most people who try out meditation, 2 hours a day kicked it up a whole new level. What I'd like to do is go into how the practice itself has transformed and evolved since increasing it to 2 hours versus the 1 hour. And then I'd also like to share some of my biggest insights that I've achieved from increasing the intensity. So the first thing that I would say is really transformed is the depth to which the practice starts to be experienced with when I'm sitting down and formally meditating. I would say that, quote unquote, mystical experiences are quite regular now with this intensity of practice. It feels like my perceptive experience starts to break apart. That's the best way I can explain it. So a lot of times we feel like we're in a very static, objectified world where there are physical objects that are very stationary. They don't move. They're very rock solid. If I'm standing on the ground right now, this ground in a traditional or rather in a normal state of consciousness feels very grounded. But when we start entering into states of incredible concentration, incredible clarity because our mind is just gaining the momentum of the practice over those long periods of time, the world starts to break apart and be experienced rather fluidly. So during formal sits, a lot of times what will happen is that the sensations of my body will start to feel like waves. So instead of feeling like a solid object, I start to feel like a spacious, wavy object that has the capacity to blend, expand, contract into its immediate environment. Sounds and physical sights also take on this quality of fluidity and spaciousness. So as we enter into these radically concentrated states, these types of mystical experiences start to occur more regularly. And what's interesting to note is that when we start to investigate these states or when we start to gain access to them more regularly, we can start to see the contrast between why those states are occurring the way that they are and why our normal states are the way they are. In this case, one of the big key catalysts for accessing very profound mystical states during formal meditation is just a function of concentration. How much awareness can you bring to your attention as your attention is penetrating into different objects? So there's two qualities going on here. One is the quality of attention. How strong, how sensitive is your attention insofar as penetrating objects of perceptive experience? And then how powerful is your awareness of your attention as your attention is moving from object to object during practice? There's also been a very profound integration between what is formal practice and what is everyday life. So it's interesting because when we do something like sitting for 2 hours a day, that does seem very marcated. Like the difference between what is practice and what is everyday life, it feels very cut and dry, and this is my formal sitting time, this is my everyday life. And especially when you do 2 hours a day, you have to be very disciplined with yourself about being able to sit and actually commit to the practice. So finding the time in our day to get those 2 hours in can be very, very challenging. So on one level, yes, there is this clear distinction between formal practice and what's not considered formal practice. But on the other hand, there is this distinction, this distinction does start to dissolve. I have found within myself that the duality between what is considered formal practice and what is not has continually dissolved and continues to dissolve. I'll slip into random states of high mindfulness, just being out, living life, doing my thing. Whereas before, when I was just doing an hour, actually, those types of moments were not as regular. And so one of the long-term consequences of meditation practice, one of the long-term consequences or outcomes that we want is for the practice to really integrate into our life, so that even if we're formally meditating or we're not formally meditating, we're still in these states of high concentration and states of high mindfulness, such that this distinction between formal practice starts to dissolve at increasingly deep levels. Another consequence of this rigor of practice is that we stop experiencing boredom, or at least I have, to a large extent. I mean, yes, I can sometimes still get bored, but like a lot of times, if I am in a boring situation, that's just a time that I can practice meditation sort of in the background or on autopilot. This distinction between like mystical, sacred, profound, flamboyant states of consciousness that maybe we traditionally get with the pyrotechnics of something like psychedelics, the distinction between those pyrotechnics and fireworks and then just being completely dead-ass sober, living life not in a profound state, the significance of these differences also starts to dissolve. So the mystical starts to become mundane, and the mundane starts to become mystical. And I think this is one of the marks of maturity on the spiritual path, is being able to see this deep equilibrium between profound states of consciousness and states that are rather mundane, like just waking up in the morning, taking a shower, brushing your teeth. Like that is just as sacred as merging with the cosmos on a psychedelic trip. But it takes a recontextualization of our direct experience in order to be able to understand that reality, or that collapsing of the duality between the two. And so that's been one of the most profound shifts in my experience, is that like when I first started meditation, I was very much after like profound mystical states. And so even though I just got done saying that I have access to those states more regularly, and that's true, their importance, as I've been able to reliably access them, like their importance has collapsed. And so that's one of the things that I'd like to communicate, is just that like the mundane, man, like the boring state of mind that we find ourselves in, perhaps even normally when we meditate, like that is just as productive to work with. And it's just as sacred and profound as blasting off on DMT or LSD or something like that. Like there is this equilibrium across all states of consciousness that we start to see and feel and understand at an embodied level of being when we commit to just hour after hour after hour, day after day after day, month after month of rigorous meditation practice. And so this sort of leads into the final, I guess, update that I'd like to share about practice is, you know, it is going really well, and this profound duality between mundane and the mystical and everyday life and formal practice, this is all great. But I do want to stress the importance of going from 1 hour to 2 hours. When I had the call to jump from an hour to 2 hours, I mean, the effects of meditation, the afterglow that I experience after a sit has dramatically increased. The afterglow that happens when we're consistent day after day after day after day has dramatically increased. And it's not something that is, it's not something that should be underestimated, because like, yes, there is this dissolving of all states, all forms of experience and perception and states of mind and consciousness, such that we could argue that we don't even need meditation practice to understand the spiritual significance and nature of our direct experience. That's true. But on the other hand, like the importance and significance of going from 1 hour to 2 hours has been like insane. So when we make that jump, you immediately feel the effects of what the practice can give. Now, that all being said, the other thing that I've realized doing this much meditation is that meditation in and of itself is not going to solve all of our problems. So when it comes to healing, therapy, changing our habits, self-introspection and understanding what we want to do with our lives, building new habits, all of these things, personal development, therapy, you know, this kind of self-help, self-oriented practices, meditation doesn't just take care of all of that. You have to still do all the work outside of the practice. And so this is something that was unexpected for me. For a while, I've been treating meditation as this silver bullet that solves all my problems. And to an extent, it kind of does. It kind of does solve all of our problems. But on the other hand, it doesn't. We still have to apply the practice outside of the practice. We have to bring the fruits of the work into other forms of work with us. So that might mean we sometimes have to be on medication for mental health, or we have to see a therapist, or we have to get really serious about our diet and exercise and bust our ass in the gym and work through that discomfort. We can't just like mindfulness our way out of unhealthy eating habits or not exercising. Like at some level, we have to take the emotional hit of changing our behavior and doing the work to self-actualize in other forms. So now I would just like to share some of the insights that I've realized, some like really deep and profound insights. The extent of human suffering. The extent of human suffering is astronomical. I got into meditation practice because I was curious about philosophy, understanding what the true nature of reality, what the true nature of the self was all about. And there was this like archetypical image of the Buddha sitting in meditation and just having all the answers to the universe. And for some reason that really resonated with me, and that's what got me to initially start. I was also working through anger issues at the time. That was another motivation of mine, but there really was this like curiosity inside of me that just wanted to know what was true. What's been shocking to me though is as I've gone more deeply into this practice, I've discovered that I personally suffer a lot, and I suffer on levels that are like so subtle that there's no way that I would have been able to realize that I was suffering like this unless I had gone and done the work of meditation practice. And one of the ancillary insights that we gain when we understand the extent of our own suffering is that we start to understand the extent of the suffering of the world. So when we feel our own suffering more deeply, we start to be able to empathize and feel the suffering of others in the world more deeply. And so like in a really strange way, by doing the work on ourselves, there is this like deep well of compassion that we start to have access to. We realize that the overwhelming majority of the dysfunction in the world is rooted from an ignorance of what happiness is and how much we suffer. So much of the dysfunction in the world is rooted in this astronomical misunderstanding of the nature of our minds and the nature of our own suffering. So the strategies that we employ collectively to take care of one another, to get shit done in the world, to innovate, to build society, to move humanity forward in the future, all of this is predicated on a massive ignorance as to what makes us happy. And the significance of this is that the reason that our behaviors show up in such dysfunctional ways, the reason that there is ecological collapse on the planet, for example, or massive amounts of wealth transfers going on towards the 1% on a collective level, not in any one given country, but on a collective level, the risk of existentially powerful technologies that have the capacity to completely change the landscape of which we are interacting with one another at a societal level, and the dangers thereof, the reason that all of these possibilities or actualities exist the way that they do is because we lack a wisdom and compassion that is found by turning within and paying attention to ourselves and feeling our own suffering. And so one of the huge insights that I've had from this practice, from doing this much work, is I have opened up to this enormous amount of suffering, and that changes the way that I relate to other people in the world and the vision for what I personally think humanity should be moving towards. So I say all that to say that if everyone collectively did this type of work, the movement of our future would look radically different than how it has been moving for the last 100 years, for the last 1,000 years. The massive amounts of selfishness, greed, anger, violence, all of this is predicated on that ignorance of what it means to be happy and the extent of our personal suffering. As we meditate, the quality of our mind starts to reflect the greater cosmos. So one of the things that we can realize about the universe is that it is at complete peace with itself. It's at complete peace with its own expression. There is no self-interference at the highest level of reality. Reality is being exactly as it is, wholly as it is, without any room or margin for error or shoulds or coulds or woulds. It is exactly, precisely as it is showing up. And it totally accepts itself as it is showing up. And so, one of the cool things about meditation is that that's how our minds start to transform with this practice. We start to show up in profound ways for reality, so to speak. We stop fighting with experience. We stop fighting with perception. So when we do suffer, we can suffer fully without resistance. When we're happy, we can be happy without pulling and tugging at experience to keep it that way. Where we allow the happiness to run through us unobstructed and then leave. Just leave when it's ready to. What we come to learn, what we come to experience is that this quality of mind that we're cultivating is a quality of the greater cosmos. And I know this sounds kind of new agey, this sounds maybe a little mystical schmystical, but I mean, if you just think about it, reality is completely self-accepting. Reality could not be any other way other than how it is. And so when our minds start accepting reality, when our minds start bringing complete equanimity to all expressions of reality, all circumstances, whether good, bad, positive, ugly, beautiful, this is a quality of the universe. It's like literally a quality of the fucking universe, man. And we can start to merge. We can start to enter into that territory where our relationship with the universe is the relationship that the universe has with itself. So let me just back up and say, this was not something that I realized when I was doing an hour. I don't really know when I got this, when this clicked for me, but somewhere along the way it did. And the more that I've meditated, the more that this quality of mind that is reflective of the greater cosmos, this cosmic consciousness, so to speak, the more that I've meditated, the more that this cosmic consciousness has integrated into the way that I show up into the world. And I would encourage you to have that possibility. Like, that is something that is all of our minds are capable of doing, precisely because all of our minds share that same origin, that same cosmic source. So in a sense, as the mind is transforming with these qualities, it's just going back to the origin from which it came, which was the universe. And so taking this quality of mind idea one step further, this cosmic consciousness idea one step further, when we start to really have this quality of mind take over, particularly in form or practice, a deep unity of experience starts to unfold. And what I mean by that is we start to see that the outside world, so like the sky, the ocean, the ground, rocks, trees, plants, other people, all of the appearances in our perceptive field, all of the appearances of others, of form in our direct experience, we start to recognize that there's a deep unity between all of those outside extrinsic formations of direct experience and the internal formations, so body sensations, thoughts, emotions, self-images. When we look in a mirror, our face, like the essence of experiencing ourselves as a separate thing, we start to recognize that all of these appearances are showing up in the exact same awareness, within the exact same consciousness. And so to create the distinction between self and other as separate entities, that too is an appearance within consciousness. So just speaking from personal experience, as my mind has cultivated this sense of deep equanimity with reality, my sense of self has become much more fluid. Like, I can experience the ocean as who I am. I can experience a rock as who I am. I can experience myself, my sense of self, as who I am. We realize that when reality is perceived directly, without any interference, without any pushing or pulling or tugging at experience, with a like I said, with a quality of deep equanimity or cosmic consciousness, I like that word, this sense of self starts to have the capacity to expand and contract in on itself. We can go into states of no self, where there is no self at all. There is just the emergence of reality. Or we can go into expanded states of self, where we feel as though the self is the world, the self is the universe. We realize that all appearances within consciousness, all appearances within reality, within awareness, within our awareness, share a fundamental essence. They share a fundamental source. And that source is pure being, we might call it. And this pure being is literally the ground out of which our experience of reality arises out of and passes back into moment by moment. So, you know, our sense of self changes over time. When we're born and when we die, those two selves are very different. As the self continually transforms moment after moment across a lifetime from birth to death, where does that old sense of self go to give rise to the new sense of self? It emerges out of being. And so when we start to be able to pay attention, so deeply to our direct experience that there is no more self-interference, we start to be able to clearly see how reality is emerging out of itself moment by moment. And so when that happens, we see that the world, our experience of the world, is emerging from the same source as our experience of self. And so therefore, as a matter of ontological investigation, in other words, existential philosophical investigation, the study of being is what ontology means. As a matter of ontological investigation, the nature of the world is the nature of the sense of a separate self. And we start to be able to experience that during meditation. And I would say, like, on one level, we can understand that intellectually, but it's an entirely different thing to understand that experientially. And that's one of the most profound gifts that this practice has given me as I've kicked it up to 2 hours, like reliably tapping into this level of being, this stabilization of attention on my moment by moment experience that's so precise and so sensitive that I can actually watch the expansion and contraction of reality and self moment by moment, such that a deep unification and holism appears. It's profound, and it's been a profound gift from this practice. And as we sit in this unified sense of being, we realize that this is the path to Nirvana. This is the path to emptiness. This is the path to God. This is the path to the true self. There are many contemplative traditions around the world that talk about and define what this pure being is. And when we reliably gain access to it, we begin to understand why some may call it God, why some may call it the infinite. It is that profound. And I don't really know how to speak of it other than to say that it is accessed by paying attention very, very deeply into our experience. So in conclusion, man, it's been absurd. I don't know, like it's been fucking absurd. Like this whole practice, like taking it to this level, this intensity. I'm not sure I would recommend it for everyone because it can be extremely challenging. We can run into traumas, run into negative emotions, run into fears that we didn't even know we had. We can run into like archetypical human fears. We can run into vulnerabilities of being biological entities in the world and the vulnerability that comes with that. But what I would say is that if you feel this calling to turn within and feel a calling to turn within at an intensity like 2 hours a day, like follow that source, because it is ultimately a calling of going back to who you are. And all of life's biggest questions, happiness, the ending of suffering, God, the infinite, the divine, the sacred, reside within us, all of us, each of us, as one. And so I would just say, like, trust yourself, man. Like, take it to its limits. Take it to its fucking limits. But that being said, also practice patience, also practice compassion. For myself personally, I don't know if I'm gonna keep doing 2 hours a day every single day. Like, I think one of the things I've learned is that there's something to be said for backing off and making the practice more about just getting shit done in our everyday life and practicing the bringing of meditation into our everyday life rather than just formally sitting. But we'll see, man. We'll see. There is something, like I said, deeply powerful, healing, profound about the 2 hours. So I'll have to keep you guys updated. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed my own commentary and introspection into my own practice. Thank you for your support. I hope this video is of value to you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything at all, please leave them in the comment section below. If you liked this video, please hit that like button. Consider subscribing. I try to make videos that are helpful for people who are serious about spirituality and serious about uncovering the deepest levels of what this practice of meditation can provide, / the deepest levels of practice that we can give into the world. So that's all I had. Until next time.